Delighted to welcome as our next speaker, Tim O'Brien, General Manager, Global Communications from Microsoft. Some of you with long memories may remember back in Lisbon in 2011, we welcomed a Microsoft speaker at that conference talking about their prime measurement system. But as Tim will explain, the world has changed since then, and Microsoft too has changed with it. Tim, welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Barry, for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation to come speak. I'm actually looking very much forward to giving this talk, and the reason is the process through which it came together forced something I believe is really, really important, but none of us had any time for, which is reflection. To really look back on some of the craziness of the last couple of 3 years. The way I went about this is to talk to some colleagues and get them into a conference room for 30 minutes or so and say, what do we think we've learned in the last 2 or 3 years? And you could tell they too had not had the time to reflect. You know, they'd furrow their brow and think, wow, that's an interesting question, let me think about that. So it was a fascinating set of conversations that I've been having over the last month and a half or so, and I've attempted to distill that down here. And where this journey starts for us is what was a comparatively simpler time. Once upon a time, the media environment was fairly static, fairly stable, fairly predictable. The way we approached measurement in that time was decidedly, I think, not radical, not unusual. We did some innovative things, but it was a lot of the things you would associate with media outcomes in terms of coverage reporting and how much content pick up and those sorts of things. And what's happened since is the world has changed radically. And the axes of change happen along three different pivots. One is just the media environment in general. The media consolidation is continued in earnest. The move from print to digital doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. There are fewer reporters covering more beats, so the reporter's attention becomes the scarce resource that we have to compete for. You have to be a lot more innovative in the way you pitch a story and the way you get that person's attention. It's just very, very different. The second big change is the emergence of what I would deem non-media influencers. I think these are fairly influential people, certainly in the tech industry, that have a point of view. They don't consider themselves reporters, but they have a following, and they have the ability to shift perception against a company, a brand, a product, an industry. They can metaphorically move mountains with their opinion and their point of view. And the third would be just the economics of the way it all works. You know, once upon a time there was this proverbial wall between the business side of the media business and the editorial news side. And we all had a good time pretending that this wall existed. Nobody's pretending anymore. A lot of the reporters that we talk to are just very unapologetic and unabashed about, I need page views, I need clicks, I need active users, I got a business to run. That's the deal. And it actually has an impact on measurement, because you see practices like clickbaiting, right? Somebody runs, this is the practice of running an outrageous headline to get you to click, to make you look at ads. So if somebody runs a headline that says, are humans descended from aliens, followed by a question mark, you know, you're going to click on that and read 500 words about why that's preposterous and look at some ads along the way. But from a measurement standpoint, how do you even think about that? Is that really an assertion of someone's point of view, or is that just a shameless attempt at getting you to click? So all this is very, very different. And so we've kind of made the move in the last couple of years looking at this world in its entirety. Traditional media, non-media influencers, a lot of the big thinkers who drive these conversations, the linkers who link them together, and their ability to shape and move perception. So I'm going to step through the big things that we've learned along the way. And one of the big things that we learned is for quite a long time we were rewarding A while hoping for B. Those of you who find that turn of phrase familiar have probably read this paper at some time in your life, either university or a colleague sent it to you. This is a paper that was first published in 1975 by an academic named Stephen Kerr. It was published in the Academy of Management journal. And it basically describes what happens when there's misalignment between reward systems, which are always measurement driven, and the behaviors we're trying to motivate. So in big corporations, you see things like rewarding selfishness while hoping for teamwork, rewarding risk avoidance while hoping for innovation, rewarding short-term thinking while hoping for long-term thinking. This is what the financial markets do to publicly held companies, right? So we had a situation like this. Our approach to measurement, as Barry had mentioned, was really encapsulated in this thing called Prime. Prime was a system that was an aggregate scoring system that took into consideration a broad number of inputs associated with a media outcome. Amount of coverage, the importance of the publication, where it landed in the publication, whether or not there was a quote, et cetera, et cetera. We give these things different weights. We run it through an algorithm, and you get a score on a scale of 0 to 200. And all these different pivots and parameters were things that you could manipulate to get to, manipulate in a good way to get to the media outcome that you wanted. So let me give you an example of what it looks like when you reward A while hoping for B. One of the inputs into Prime was this thing called key message pickup, which, as the name suggests, is the degree to which a key message is picked up in coverage. So if you were a communications person working at Microsoft, the Prime score is kind of your report card at the end of a media moment or a news cycle. And more key message pickup means the Prime score would go up. So the question is, how do we decide what the key message is? What is the thing that we're going to look for in coverage once the news starts breaking? So look at these two headlines. If you can't read them back, I'll read them to you. The one on the bottom says basically Microsoft's going to ship an update to Windows 10. It's fairly straightforward. It's factual information. Doesn't take a lot to get a reporter to write this. Doesn't require a leap of faith on their part. Doesn't require them to put their credibility on the line. It's just reporting the news. Doesn't take a lot of persuasiveness on the part of the comms person either. Doesn't take a lot of work. It's easy. You can fall out of bed and produce this headline just by putting a press release on the wire. The headline at the top, Windows 10 to offer Microsoft's strongest security measures ever. This is very different in the sense that it is anchored in a product truth. This is a product truth. You have to work to get the reporter to take the leap of faith with his or her readers to say, yeah, these guys have done the engineering work, they've shipped the most secure operating system ever, and this is high effort, high impact. You know, the headline on the bottom, nobody's going to read this and say, I need to get rid of my MacBook, right? This is just the date. The one on the top, that's big, right? A CIO who's tossing and turning at night wondering if their infrastructure is secure will read that and say, you know, maybe I should upgrade. And so the issue here is that what is the key message that we're looking for in coverage? If your key message is Microsoft shipped Windows 10, you can pretty much guarantee 100% key message pickup. If your key message is Microsoft delivers strong security, you're going to get less than 100% because it's harder to land that message. Some reporters are going to be skeptical. You're not going to get 100% key message pickup. And so the headline here is that we rewarded this while hoping for that. Human beings being what they are, what's the saying, the river finds a way around the rocks. We'll find a way to get the key message pickup where we want it by choosing the key message that represents the path of least resistance. So this was one of the issues with Prime that we kind of figured out over the years. And we want headlines, we want coverage, we want key messages that actually motivate action on the part of the customer. So that was a big learning for us. The second one, we often confuse reach and influence. Reach is something you get through the readership of a publication. They all publish it because they want the advertising, and you pretty much know how many people you're going to get if you land a story in a given publication. Influence is very different, and we often confuse the two. And I'll tell you a story or share an example with you about how these are not at all the same. So about a year and a half ago, we introduced holographic computing to the world with a product called Microsoft Hololens. This is a Windows 10 computer. You wear it as a headset, and it is a platform for holographic computing. This was a closely held secret. This was big news in the tech industry at the time. And the way that we did this was to have a press event in our campus in Seattle. We invited 100 reporters, and we streamed it live over the internet so everyone could see it, and we introduced this product. As I mentioned, it was streamed live over the internet. This is a photograph of Lorraine Bardine, who's one of our senior engineering leaders on this product, giving a demo of HoloLens on stage during the press event. Anybody can watch, streamed live all over the world. Somebody who's watching this thing noticed that the form factor of this device was vaguely familiar. And he posted this tweet that, oh my God, Marty McFly was using HoloLens in Back to the Future 2. And wouldn't you know, this movie was set in the year 2015, which is the year we're in now. It was pretty funny, and this went viral. So after the event, we're looking at the news coverage. We're doing all the analytics, and this viral tweet kind of jumped off the page as the one that actually created the most reach, at least in social media. So we said, who is Roderick Von Hogan? We don't know this person. He's not one of our targeted media. He's not one of our key influencers. Father Rod is a Catholic priest from Holland. He is a guy with 16,000 Twitter followers. He has 3,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel. And he just put out this funny tweet and really reached an audience that we would never have reached otherwise. Now, the operative word here is reach. Father Rod will be the first one to tell you he's not an expert or a domain expert in virtual reality, augmented reality. He's not a hardware device reviewer. He's not Engadget or Gizmodo or Ars Technica. He does not do hardware unboxing videos on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, at least to the best of my knowledge. He's a guy, he's a man of God who loves tech, which is kind of a cool combination. But the thing we got from this was reach, but not necessarily influence in the market space, in the domain in which this product narrowly exists, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. And so it was a learning for us to make sure we partition reach, which is the precursor to awareness, to interest, to trial, to adoption of a product, which is fine, and influence, which is something that really, really matters a lot when you're trying to create a new category, and that's what we were doing with this product, was category creation. Measuring natural language is not easy, and natural language is a term that actually has real meaning in computer science. And so natural language processing, an example of natural language processing is speech to text, with Cortana and Siri. That's basically what you're doing. But I'll attempt to up-level it here. The more unnatural the language, the easier the measurement. When news gets reported, quite often it'll read something like, today, Microsoft announced the following product will be available for the following price at the following markets in the following dates. If you're doing automated measurement of key messages or sentiment or tone, you're not gonna mess that up. It's pretty easy to extract the true meaning of that, but that's not how people talk to each other. And stylistically, in the tech industry, the style of reporting is shifting decidedly away from that formality into a lot of fairly informal op-ed type discussion. A lot of slang, a lot of foul language, a lot of sarcasm. Maybe this is a tech industry artifact, but this is the way that it's going. And so we had an experience with this recently, with what was a tough announce for us. About a year ago, November, we announced some changes to the terms of service of our cloud storage offering called Onedrive. And this was a product that was launched with a promise to customers that would be free, unlimited usage forever, ad-funded service. We didn't know a lot about usage patterns of cloud storage at the time. This was early days, relatively speaking. And so a number of our customers really took advantage of this free offer. We had one guy who put 19 terabytes of data into this service. And so we looked at the usage patterns, we extrapolated the growth curves over time, and thought, this is economically unstable, economically unsustainable. And I don't mean to make light of it, because the thing we had to do here was to break a promise to customers. This was a tough announce. We knew this was going to be a tough announce. And so the measurement exercise here is to look at the sentiment of the press coverage and the social media activity and see how negative was this going to go. How damaging was it going to be to the brand? How much damage was it going to do to the reputation? And I'm just being very, very candid with you. And so we looked at, obviously, everything. And here's a sampling of some tweets. Again, if you can't read them in the back, I'll make sure that you have the meaning. This is a pretty representative of what people were saying on social media. Hey, gee, thanks a lot. I'm going to go to your competitor now. that sort of thing. So when you're trying to automate the extraction of tone and automate the extraction of sentiment from social media traffic for this news cycle, you have to be careful, because this is the way people talk to each other in a pub, and machines don't understand that. So machines pick up the pink that you'll see here, which is, hey, very nice of Microsoft to do this, great customer service, hey, thanks Microsoft, and wow, thanks a lot Microsoft, appreciate that. This is how customers actually feel. I'm going to Dropbox, you suck, sad emoticon. And if you rely too much on automation, the machines think that something really good is happening when in fact the sentiment is getting lost in that. So being able to, the more coverage trends towards sarcasm, which you don't see quite a lot of here in the UK, but in other parts of the world, it's used quite a bit. It really can throw a spanner in your measurement. And I think this is an unsolvable problem. Detection of sarcasm in digital media is something that requires context. This is a machine learning problem. Extremely difficult to do. But it was a big learning for us, because in the tech industry we have a disproportionately high number of grumpy people saying snarky things. This can actually become an issue longer term. Big learning number 4, we had a tendency to be myopic about measurement. Measurement of a media outcome. You generally look at things like how much coverage did you get, how much did it get reused, what's the tone, what's the sentiment, what's the share of voice, all the kind of language of measurement that we would think about. So the example for us was a story that we published in April of 2013, about 3 years ago, on our own channel. The story was called 88 Acres. And it was a story that we modeled after the famous New York Times snowfall piece, in which we told the story of how Microsoft is building a smart city of the future on our Redmond campus outside of Seattle, in which all of these buildings are networked together, producing massive amounts of data to optimize energy efficiency, energy usage, ultimately saving the company millions and millions of dollars. We did this we published the story for 2 reasons. Number one, this was early days and kind of testing out the power of owned media. Quite often, we had this history of relying on the press, relying on the media to tell our stories for us. We're like, hey, we have a big global brand, we have a big presence on the web, why don't we tell our own stories? And we knew we were onto something when a lot of members of the press were saying rude things about, who does Microsoft think they are? They think they're in the journalism business now. That's when we knew we were onto something. And the second reason was to try to get some innovation credit. This is a time, 2013, where Microsoft, we felt the credit we deserved for a lot of the innovative work that we were doing. So this was a thought leadership piece. That's what this was. It was not to motivate product purchases, was not to do anything like that. It was to test out the power of owned media on our own channels, and at the same time say, hey, we're doing something that's really, really unique here. And so after this news cycle, we measure the content pickup, the press coverage, the content reuse, the social media traffic, all the usual stuff. But something amazing happened that we didn't anticipate, that I wish we had, because we would have measured it. Our phone was ringing off the hook. Customers were calling, big enterprise customers with sizable investments in real estate facilities saying, I want that. I have these same set of problems, I'm hemorrhaging cash, running all these facilities. I don't know what this thing is, I don't know how much it costs, I just want to buy it. Can we talk now? And we wound up, and understand, this was not buy now PR. Right? There was no call to action, there was no limited time offer, click here, none of that. This was 4,000 words. One sentence in this piece had a mention of a Microsoft product, that was it. This was not about our stuff, it was about the future. We wound up with a fairly sizable pipeline of sales opportunities from big enterprise customers as a result of this. And so in our own myopia, like, what's success here? We did not consider that outcome, and maybe we should have. So open your mind, be more sort of free thinking in terms of what the possibilities are with something like this, which is by design a thought leadership piece. So the last lesson, language trumps location. We generally think about landing press coverage in the context of a geographical location. We're bound by the borders of a country. And this is the way it's always been. This is the way we've always approached it. And what we found, what we learned over the last couple of years is that the borders of a country matter less and less. We were always of the attitude, you take the English-speaking web and you just set it aside. In Japan, people speak Japanese. In Brazil, people speak Portuguese. In Russia, people speak Russian. The French are speaking French, and that's the end of it. And what we discovered is that those borders of countries matter less and less. So if you just look at this map of where people in the world are speaking Chinese, again, I'll net it out for you if it's hard to see in the back. Obviously, it's the native language in China. Let's just set that aside for a moment. But there's over 5 million people in Indonesia and Malaysia that speak Chinese. Right? There's over 1 million people in Vietnam that speak Chinese. There's over 1 million people in the United States that speak Chinese. And then you have Chinatowns in these large cities around the world, in which you have large combinations of people that are speaking Mandarin. And they're on Weibo and they're on WeChat, and this is where the conversations are happening. Even in, so if you look at a country like Spain, Spanish is obviously spoken in Spain and Latin America, but outside of Latin America and Spain, there are 20 million Spanish speakers here in Europe, outside of Spain. And there's something like 50 million in the United States. So we need to think less and less about borders and more about the language spoken. So here's an example. This is a product announced from a company. The company doesn't matter, the product doesn't matter, the industry doesn't matter. It's just something that we had analyzed. And what you're looking at is a graphic that described networked Twitter conversations color-coded by the spoken language. And so what you're seeing here are obviously teeny tiny little dots on this graphic. The size of the dot indicates how much influence that the Twitter user had. This just happens to be Twitter, it could be anything. The more influence, the more followers, the bigger the dot. When there's conversations happening between users, the closer the dots move together. So that's why you see the color coding shaking out like it is. So obviously the center of gravity is English in the hot pink here, but look at what else is happening. You see a lot of Spanish speakers clustering around us, German speakers. We don't care where they are. We don't care where they are. We care where the conversations is happening. So this was a big learning for us, that influence is wielded by this sort of commonality that has less and less to do over time with the borders of a given country or a market or a geographic location. This is really kind of the impact of the web on mind share and perception and influence. So those were the kind of 5 big lessons that we had learned. I'll wrap it up here, which the obvious question is, where do we go from here? A lot more experimentation. One of the things that I didn't talk about earlier in terms of changes at Microsoft was the radical changes in culture. And one of the big changes in culture is that trying new things and having them not work out is okay as long as you pay it back to the business in the form of learnings that you've extracted along the way. So we do quite a bit of that. We'll continue to do more. But in the interest of time, I think we should go to Q&A and we can have a brief discussion.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. So you heard about a big company, great company in transition, and some of the challenges and learnings. Tim was keen to emphasize that, to go with it. So I'm looking for the first question to pick up on Tim and their journey. And we'll come down to Evgeny, please. The blue shirt. Yeah. And will the next questioner please show their hands so we can get ready?
Thank you, Tim, for the presentation. My name is Evgeny, Sibels, Russia. I would like to ask, how do you measure the impact of PR on your business results?
The input on our business results?
Yeah.
It depends on the altitude of the communications effort. So if it's buy now PR, if your job is to publicize the availability of an offer or a program or something like that, that's easily measurable. You can draw a correlation and assume causality between a communications motion and the result in terms of sales of a product. So that's actually fairly straightforward. It gets a little more difficult when you start getting up into thought leadership work, perception, image, brand, reputation, and we do that externally with a lot of surveys, polls, and then automated work in terms of social media, where we can track in real time what the sentiment is toward Microsoft. What the biggest change has been just the compression of the measurement and the result, right? I remember when I first started at Microsoft 13 years ago, we used to do measurement of how certain technical audiences felt about the company, and we did this once a year. Once a year, we take one poll, somebody get on the phone, we survey company and say, hey, how do you feel about Microsoft on security? And if it was the day after we had a virus outbreak, God help you. I mean, that was just going to be a bad answer. And so now we can do a lot of real-time surveying and polling of information and sentiment extraction. And we've gotten much better about not getting fixated on individual products and brands, because that's the level of business result that you mentioned, that I think was the fixation of the company for a long time. We cared less about the Microsoft master brand and more about Windows and Office and a lot of the sub-brands that live underneath that. We've kind of moved back to the point where master brand, perception, image, reputation has become increasingly important.
Okay, thank you. Andy West from Hotline.
Nice to intro, Barry. Tim, that's a great speech, and I've heard you talk before, and you talked about the challenges you had rolling out the Prime system around the world in an organisation the size of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. What you've talked about here is a very logical evolution given the changes we've seen in the influencer environment. How is your organisation adapting to that, and how are you getting consistency of results across the business worldwide that are meaningful for you back at corporate?
There's two questions in there. What has the change been like, and then the consistency question, which are kind of orthogonal points. The change is either accelerated or decelerated by the culture change that's happening. It would be a mistake to talk about the things that we're doing here in isolation. Like, this is just communications. Those of you who pay attention to the tech industry or Microsoft know that there's just broad-based changes going on at the company level, and so human psychology plays a big role here. Human beings, when we're under pressure, we retreat into what works. We retreat in what's worked in the past. And so, we found that people will be reluctant to embrace a change if there's uncertainty associated with it, because the existing thing, even if it isn't great, at least it's a sure thing. And that's just required a lot of internal evangelism. I mean, a lot of repetitiveness, a lot of internal communications. And so I think the biggest learning from that is don't underinvest in internal communications in terms of selling this idea to the org. So it's not been easy. To be totally candid with you, it's not been easy. But it gets easier if you invest in the internal comms side and just don't assume that people will do it because it's the right thing. That's insufficient. The second question was about the consistency. The English language web is kind of the dominant thing. But we have subsidiary operations. We operate in some 200 countries around the world. And a lot of the innovation in terms of measurement is starting in English because it's the biggest language. That's understandable. But we have to support multiple languages, some 36 languages in our subsidiaries around the world. And so you have a little bit of a delta in terms of where all the great R&D is happening, which is all English language stuff, like cracking the sarcasm nut and all those sorts of things, and just baseline multi-language measurement across a broad number of different language spectrums. And so we partner with Mike Redstrom and Gorkana. They both do great work for us, great companies to work with. And we're making strides toward commingling that data to get to some consistency so that people in France are looking at the same thing that the people in corporate can look at because it's all in English.
Okay, thank you. Tim is totally cool with you setting the stage up while we go for our last question.
Coming up.
Down here, please. Thank you.
I just don't want to get in the way.
I'm Project Pogoda from Newton Media. You mentioned people that could, using their reach, using the power, move mountains, like the guys that are not journalists, but instead can cause a lot of trouble or cause a lot of fun for you.
Yeah.
How do you measure them against, let's say, typical media, against the typical sources where you normally get information from?
That's a great question.
In your own mind, I mean, within the company.
A non-media influencer, how do you manage them? If you start to try to manage them as if they're media, that's the wrong thing to do. Because the last thing, I think a lot of them take pride in the fact there's a little bit of a counterculture there, and I don't mean that to be pejorative, it's a good thing, it's just the world is changing and there's a different way of reaching people. And it's caused a lot of disruption, obviously, in the traditional media space. So if you try handling people like that, handling in the pejorative sense, they don't want to have it. So you have to kind of meet them where they are. So an example would be a reporter for a technical publication. They expect to get a press pass for an event. They expect to deal with your communications agency. They expect to get access to executives. There's a social contract there just based on the fact this is the way we've been doing it for a long, long time. If you have someone who's got a following on social media because they're a deeply, deeply technical developer, they've either developed something, published it in open source, and they've got a huge following in the open source community because they've done amazing things in computer science. We'll take a technical evangelist, for example, and engage with that person in that way, so they're on the same level. The last thing a developer wants to do is talk to a PR person. They just don't. They want to talk to other developers about tech. So the technical people who have domain expertise in your organizations, who actually know how to kind of work in this environment, are incredibly valuable resources because they can meet those people where they are and at the same time move toward whatever business outcome you're trying to get to, which is either a change in perception or educate that person on something that we're doing that maybe they wouldn't know about. It's a very different model. It's a great question.
And for now, we need to leave it there. Tim is going to be with us for the rest of the day, right?
Yeah.
So please, let's make Tim's come a long way. So let's make sure we learn from his experience. Thank you so much. Thank you.